Hello folks, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 releases in less than 2 weeks time, and if you've paid even the slightest bit of attention towards the game thus far, you may very well be aware of the criticisms regarding its lack of RPG mechanics, despite its Bloodlines title. Now, the original Bloodlines game was released all the way back in 2004, and despite being a very prevalent PC gamer back at that time, I have to admit, I didn't even know the game existed. Since deciding to feature Bloodlines 2 on the channel, I have been diving into this entire debacle even further, going so far as to purchase Bloodlines 1 to try and get an understanding of just how different Bloodlines 2 is shaping up to be. And boy, I do have to say that even with as little as 7 or so hours racked up on the game thus far, I completely understand why any fan of the original would be upset that they've slapped the Bloodlines 2 title on this game. Now, I have not played Bloodlines 2 yet, but I can assure you I've watched a maddening amount of footage at this point, and for all intents and purposes, these are two very different games, outside of lore, theme, namesake, etc. I'm putting together something a lot deeper than this, but it will require much more time spent in both Bloodlines 1 and 2 before I can, so for now, we're just going to use what I do know so far. For a start, anyone asking the question as to why this is an issue, that Bloodlines 2 looks like a good game, and so why can't people just enjoy it, need to appreciate just exactly what Bloodlines 1 is, and that the criticism here isn't Bloodlines 2 looks like a bad game, it's Bloodlines 2 does not look like Bloodlines 2. This is made most obvious with the lack of RPG mechanics. For a start, in Bloodlines 2, you only have 6 class selections, and all depth is packed into this single skill tree right here. Whereas in Bloodlines 1, we have 7 classes to choose from, and then this skill tree right here. The fact that Bloodlines 2 does not have a similar skill tree guarantees that it does not contain the same level of depth regarding physical strength, sneaking ability, lockpicking, hacking, seducing, intimidating, etc. Which means that the gameplay, leveling choices, replayability value, and overall nuance to the game that these skills created is virtually non-existent within its direct sequel. Some of the skills contained within here impacted your overall effectiveness with your bare hands, melee weapons or guns, as well as haggling better prices at stores. A bunch of mechanics that do no longer exist, as all melee and ranged weapons have for the most part been removed, beyond being able to be briefly used with telekinesis, and then there is no inventory to store weapons, items, or currencies to be used. Bloodlines 2 does feature some consumables, but that is just about it. The sheer lack of the skill tree, inventory system, and all of the knock-on effects that comes with this is beyond apparent. But to add even more to the pile, as I mentioned before, there are no speech checks in regards to seducing, intimidating, or persuading. This isn't to say the dialogue mechanics within Bloodlines 2 will be worse, but they certainly won't be what fans would expect from the name, and that can also be said for everything mentioned already. To add to this, we are of course also missing lockpicking, hacking, investigation, and research, 4 additional mechanics that made the original what it was. That is just to touch on the RPG mechanics, and we haven't even really dived into all of the nuance, but I honestly feel like we don't really need to in order for me to make my point. Bloodlines 1 is a cult classic from all the way back in 2004. I appreciate a lot of gamers have seen Bloodlines 2, like what they see, and want to support the game. So to put things into perspective, so players far less familiar with the franchise can hopefully appreciate the core issues. Just imagine the likes of Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 5, or New Vegas 2 releasing tomorrow, only to have none of the most basic foundations, being an inventory, skill tree, shops, etc. And before you say, but waived, Bloodlines 2 does have a skill tree. 5 skills with multiple variations doesn't quite cut it as far as I'm concerned, but I appreciate it is still there. Bloodlines 2 does still feature some mechanics from the original, whilst reshaping and improving others to help refine the game, and that should be considered quite a positive thing. Stealth does still exist, however, instead of you allotting skill points into getting better at it, some classes now have skills that improve stealth further, and generally lean into it more than others. The Masquerade mechanic, which is basically an even bigger stealth mechanic, also still exists. Watch what you're doing in front of humans, otherwise you'll break the Masquerade and upset just about everyone. And there are still other mechanics, like the directionally controlled melee combat and feeding on enemies to replenish your vitals, albeit these do work slightly differently. On top of this, Bloodlines 2 does also include other mechanics that never existed in the first game, such as the ability to actually move like a vampire through the streets. Leaping, gliding, and climbing rooftop to rooftop is definitely an upgrade from the basic maneuverability in the first game. And of course, we do also have telekinesis right from the start of the game, which can pull and push enemies, wield items in combat or puzzle solve, so a nice range of options and a solid vampiric addition. There are likely other mechanics not yet shown or shared in this particular video, but all of this is just to create a general picture of the overarching issues a lot of the original fans have. And none of this is to say I don't like the looks of Bloodlines 2, that I think it's a bad game, or that I'm not interested in it, because I very much am. It is all instead to say this game is doing a massive disservice to the franchise, and there's very likely only a handful of reasons as to why they have done this. To outline what those reasons would be, we first need to very briefly cover this game's development, which can be summarized with the next 5 sentences. Number 1, Paradox announced Bloodlines 2, hire some devs to begin accepting pre-orders. Presumably, the original vision for the game was an RPG. Number 2, for reasons that don't necessarily matter right now, Paradox fires that original dev team, but are left with a bunch of pre-orders to still fulfill. Number 3, Paradox brings in the Chinese room devs to begin/continue working on the game. Number 4, during this entire period of time, Paradox choose not to change the name of the title, while simultaneously knowing it's shaping into a different experience than they originally planned. And then finally, number 5, the game is created, however it shares barely any similarities with its predecessor, or what was originally promised many years ago. Now, when it comes to the Bloodlines 2 name, there are other Vampire the Masquerade games that share different gameplay and are promptly not named Bloodlines 2. So, the fact that Bloodlines 2 wasn't renamed to something more appropriate can be seen as Paradox just pushing the game under that name in hopes of it selling well as a result, seemingly with no care for how different the actual experience is going to be. An alternative reason could be the complications with having promised and received pre-orders for a title named Bloodlines 2, so to then change the name within a year or so of release could have been viewed as deceptive, just as keeping the name is being viewed as deceptive right now. So I do appreciate it's likely quite a tricky situation. However, I do lean more towards Paradox being deceptive as a whole, as up till not long ago, they had locked 2 of the 6 playable classes behind the premium edition of the game, meaning out of 3 total versions, only 1 had full access to all classes. However, they've since walked this back, and now all 6 classes are free for all players at launch. There is basically no excuse for this. They knew what they were doing when they announced it, which is to test what they could get away with, and the only saving grace is they have actually listened and gone back on this decision. But I can't say that gives me much faith. It is a showing of true colours, and leads me to assume they'll just attempt more non-consumer friendly practices in the future. I won't get into it here, but Paradox don't have the best track record, and all of this is to essentially explain why I think the decision to keep the Bloodlines title is a selfish and deceptive one, as opposed to being for any other reason. Now, it is important that I point out I'm just referring to Paradox here, as the Chinese room developers have, for all intents and purposes, come into a game mid-development and delivered something that does look very promising, albeit a far cry from its original vision. This does lead me to the other side of the issue, which would be the portion of players who are just excited for this game, based on its own merits and similarities with successful titles like BioShock, Dishonored, Prey, etc. What I'm basically trying to emphasize to those players is, regardless of whether Bloodlines 2 is a good game or not, it is not what was promised, and due to multiple decisions regarding its actual gameplay, name, etc., its launch and overall success will undoubtedly be affected. Some players will simply just not know how different things are before jumping in, and will likely be upset after the fact. Others will and have already boycotted the game, whilst others may even enjoy it, but still yearn for what could have been. I've no doubt though that the vast majority of players will still enjoy this game, as it will likely attract a lot of newcomers to the franchise, just based on its gameplay alone. But the negativity will still coexist with the good, when it could have been avoided in multiple ways prior to launch, by either creating the game that was promised, or adjusting its name to reflect what it actually is. This middle ground, regardless of the reason for its existence, will hinder this game's success, and although I don't quite know what that will mean for its future, it is a pretty big fact that I felt all fans of this game or franchise should know moving forward. Now, with all of that said, I do not hold any negativity or contempt for Bloodlines 2. I've only just started playing Bloodlines 1, and although I can appreciate what Bloodlines 2 was supposed to be for fans of the franchise, and a small part of me is saddened that that isn't what's on the way, I do very much not have a horse in this race. And beyond my own personal opinions towards the way Paradox operate, I am actually really excited for this game, and I can't wait to play on release. Or maybe sooner if I get early access, but I won't hold my breath, especially when I make videos like this one. So we have less than 2 weeks before launch. I'll be dropping a few more videos between now and then a bunch more upon release. 1 or 2 will likely be following up on this topic, especially once I've managed to play Bloodlines 2 and have sunk plenty more hours into 1. So do keep an eye out for those. Anyway, that would be it for this one, folks. I will be back soon with plenty more, and I do of course have a range of guide and news videos on the channel already, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.